Hi again, back with our book. We're on at chapter 4 and hopefully we'll finish that today. Alex, Connor said with understanding eyes. We've been through a lot in the last year. It's perfectly normal to feel overwhelmed. But the humming started again. They looked back at the land of stories on the sink. To Alex's relief and Connor's horror, it was glowing. Connor jumped back against the wall as if he were there in the presence of an explosive. "The Land of Stories book," Connor yelled. "It glows. It hums." "I told you," Alex said. Connor's mouth was open so wide it was almost touching his chest. "Is it radioactive?" he asked. "I doubt it," Alex told him. She reached for the book. "Don't touch it, Alex," Connor shouted. "Relax, Connor," Alex assured him. "I've been dealing with it all week." Using one finger, she flicked the book open, and the entire restroom was illuminated. All the illustrations and writing had disappeared, and the pages seemed to be made out of pure light. Alex leaned closer to the book. "Listen, do you hear that?" she asked. "I can hear birds and leaves. I've never heard sounds come out of it before." Connor edged away from the wall and leaned down with his sister. The sound of birds chirping and trees blowing in the wind echoed off the tile and porcelain in the bathroom. "How is this possible?" Connor asked. "Are you sure it doesn't have batteries or something?" "My most educated analysis, with all means of science and technology in mind, is that it's magic," Alex said. "There's no other possible explanation." "Do you think Grandma knows about this?" Connor asked. "She had the book for years and she gave it to us. Do you think this has happened before?" "I don't think Grandma would have given it to us if she knew what it was capable of," Alex said. "You're right," Connor said. "She still cuts up my meat when she comes for dinner, but doesn't trust me with knives." "There's more," Alex said. She reached into her school bag and pulled out a pencil. Carefully, she placed the pencil on the open book. It quickly sank into the glowing page and disappeared. Where did it go?" Alex said, or Connor said, sorry. "I don't know," Alex said. "I've been dropping things into it all week. Pencils, books, dirty socks, and anything else that I could find. I think it might be some kind of portal." "A portal to what?" Connor asked. Alex didn't have an answer. Of course, there was one location that she had hoped it might lead to. The twins leaned down ever closer to the book, their noses almost touching it. They had to squint because it was so bright. Suddenly, a bright red bird flew out of the book. The twins screamed and ran around the room in panic. They bumped into each other, into the walls and into the sinks as the bird zoomed above them. It was just as panicked as they were. Finally, Connor opened the bathroom door and the bird flew out of the room and into the world. "You didn't say things come out of it too," Connor yelled. "I didn't know. That's the first time that's happened," Alex yelled back at him. The book slowly dimmed and returned to normal. Connor's head was spinning. He couldn't believe all the things he had just witnessed. No wonder Alex was having such a rough week. He now felt his own sanity might be slipping too. "We have to get rid of this book," Connor exclaimed. "After school, we should ride our bikes down to the creek and toss it so no one will ever find it." "We can't get rid of it," Alex said. "It's Grandma's book. It's been in our family for years." "Birds are flying out of it, Alex. I'm sure she'll understand," he said. "What if a lion or a shark comes out of it next? I know it drives you crazy when you don't know about stuff, but this is one matter you need to let go of. It could be more dangerous than we think. Who knows what could happen?" She knew her brother was right, but there was something about the whole situation that intrigued her past the point of reason. "I think you're overreacting," Alex said. "I don't want to get rid of it until I know more about it." She closed the book, put it back in her school bag, and walked out of the restroom. "Alex, don't walk away! Alex!" Connor called after her. The twins returned to class. All the students were silently reading their history books. "Alex, we need to talk," Connor whispered. "Mr. and Mrs. Bailey, please have a seat and read the chapter on America," Mrs. Peters ordered from her desk. "Yes, Mrs. Peters," Alex said, and then turned back to her brother and whispered, "We'll talk about it later, Connor." Connor let out a sound similar to something a bear would make. "Mr. Bailey, how was the nurse?" Mrs. Peters asked. "There was no need. My elbow started feeling much better before I got there," Connor said, holding the other elbow than the one he had previously claimed was hurting. Mrs. Peters raised an eyebrow so high it was almost above her. The twins sat at their desks and opened their history books, but neither of them could actually read. Their thoughts were so loud it was impossible to focus on anything. Connor kept looking up at his sister, hoping she'd turn around so he could make some sort of gesture to make her understand how serious the situation was. Alex could feel her brother's eyes on the back of her head, so she remained facing forward, set on ignoring him. And then the worst possible thing that could have happened. The Land of Stories began humming in the quiet classroom from inside Alex's bag. She looked back at her brother, finally making eye contact. What were they going to do? Mrs. Peters had been so caught up in her lesson plan that she hadn't heard it earlier. Was it possible for her to miss it again? "What is that noise?" Mrs. Peters demanded. All of the students were looking around the room, wondering the same thing. Alex and Connor were terrified. They felt like their stomachs had fallen out of their bodies. Mrs. Peters got up from her desk and started searching around the room, like a coyote sniffing out its prey. She walked up and down the aisles of the desk, getting closer and closer to Alex. "If anyone knows what that is, they'd better tell me before I find it," the teacher warned. Alex could feel her heartbeat in her throat. There was no telling what could happen if her teacher found the book. She could only imagine what a fuss the school would make of the discovery. Perhaps they'd call the local news stations. Perhaps government officials would take the book away for experimental testing. Perhaps her family would be taken away because they had so much in close contact with it. Mrs. Peters arrived at Alex's desk. "Miss Bailey, is there something in your bag?" she asked her. All the colour in Alex's face drained away. She needed a miracle. Suddenly, a large history book flew from the back of the classroom and hit Mrs. Peters on the head, leaving a large dent in her curly hair. The entire class turned to the back of the room and saw Connor's extended hand. He had just thrown a book at their teacher. Mrs. Peters' face turned bright red. A charging bull would have seemed harmless compared to the way she was looking at Connor. "Mr. Bailey, what on earth has gotten into you?" she screamed. The whole class must have heard her. For a brief moment, Connor saw his entire life flash before his eyes. He honestly thought he was about to die. His face was so white he was almost transparent. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Peters," Connor whimpered. "There was a bee. I didn't mean to hit you," he lied. Steam was practically coming out of the teacher's ears and nostrils. "Detention, Mr. Bailey, for the rest of the week, next week, and the week after that," Mrs. Peters said. She returned to her desk and immediately began filing out every detention slip she had in her possession. Thankfully, the room had become so tense that everyone had forgotten about the humming sound, and even more thankfully, they hadn't noticed it slowly fade away. Connor's mission was accomplished. He knew he'd done the right thing, not as a student, but as a brother. Soon the bell rang and all the students left their desks and filed out of the classroom, except for Connor, who remained in his seat. Alex walked up to him. "Thanks for that," she said. "You owe me one," Connor told her. She nodded and then left the classroom to walk home alone. Connor remained seated until Mrs. Peters finished filing out all of her detention slips. "Come here, Mr. Bailey," she said. Connor approached her desk as if it were on fire. "Throwing things in my classroom will never be tolerated. Do you understand me, Mr. Bailey?" she said, heavily pronouncing each syllable of the word. "One more incident like that, and you will be expelled." He gulped and nodded. She handed him a large stack of detention slips. "Your mother will need to sign all of these," Mrs. Peters told him. He nodded again. "I'm really sorry," Connor said. "I hope I didn't hurt you." He was so genuine that even Mrs. Peters could sense his regret. She knew that, deep down, Connor had always been a good kid. A horrible student, but a good kid nonetheless. "It's all right, Mr. Bailey," she said. "I believe I may have underestimated the effect your family situation has had on you and your sister. I'm going to contact your mother with a list of different after-school programs I think you and your sister should take part in, as well as a list of self-help books that might be beneficial." Connor nodded in agreement. I think if you had some place to escape to once in a while, it would help you deal with whatever you're going through, she said. Connor continued nodding. If there was ever a time in his life when he needed an escape from reality, it was now. And he was sure his sister would agree. And then, like lightning, the thought hit him. Oh my God, Alex, Connor thought. She's going to travel into the book herself. That's why she's been holding on to it. That's why she refused to get rid of it. Connor dropped all of the detention slips and bolted towards the door. Sorry, Mrs. Peters, I can't do detention today. Something has just come up. Mr. Bailey, get back here right now, she yelled at him. But it was too late. He was already gone. Connor was running as fast as he could down the street. Alex had gotten so much of a head start. Would he make it home to stop her? What if she was already gone by the time he got there? What if he never saw her again? His feet began to ache, a horrible pain grew inside his chest, and his heart felt like it was beating out of it. But he continued running. He just prayed he wasn't too late. It hadn't been more than 5 minutes since Alex had gotten home when the Land of Stories began acting up again. She ran up the stairs to her bedroom and promptly shut the door behind her. Alex took the Land of Stories out of her school bag and placed it on her bedroom floor. She opened the cover and her room lit up from its golden glow. She smiled to herself. Alex had always hoped something magical would happen to her, and now something finally was. She pulled out a pencil from her school bag and placed it on top of the book and watched it disappear. Alex looked around the room for other disposable things she could drop into the book. She was out of pencils, and the books left in her bookshelves were ones she wanted to keep. She looked down at her school bag. She did have plenty of school bags. She placed a whole bag on top of the book and watched as its two slowly sank into the storybook. Where were all of these things going? Was it transporting them to another part of the world? Would she find a pile of her school supplies in India or China? Or did the book send the items someplace else entirely? Was it possible they were going to another world? Was it the world that Alex secretly hoped for? There was only one way to find out. It was an idea she had managed to suppress all week. What if she went into the book? No, she couldn't possibly do a stupid thing like that. What if she never came out? But what if she stuck her hand into the book? What would happen? Would it hurt? Would her whole arm disappear? Alex's curiosity overruled her caution. She sat on her knees and bent over the book very carefully. Alex started with just her fingertips. So far, so good. No pain. She only felt a warm, tingly sensation. Alex reached farther. She was wrist deep now, and still nothing had happened that worried her. She went farther. The book was up to her elbow. If the book hadn't been there, her hand would surely be sticking through the ceiling downstairs. Alex leaned forward even farther, almost shoulder deep into the book. She moved her arm around, seeing if there was anything to grab onto inside. Suddenly, her bedroom door burst open and Connor ran inside, sweating and out of breath. Alex, don't do it! He completely startled her. Alex lost her balance and fell headfirst into the book. Alex! Connor cried out to his sister. He jumped to the ground, trying to grab her foot before she disappeared entirely. But it was too late. Alex had fallen into the Land of Stories. And that is the end of chapter 4. So tomorrow we will begin chapter 5, which is called From the Mouth of a Frog. And you can see there the little illustration. So hopefully we can start reading that. So I'll see you tomorrow with chapter 5. Bye.